Welcome to another episode of the Para Cave podcast. And now over to your host, Troy Warner, broadcasting live from the world-famous Para Cave.
And yes, hello and welcome back to another episode of the Para Cave podcast. It is the tipping podcast for round number 6, brought to you by Assure Strata Reports on Instagram and also Buddy Oldman Masters Boxer on Facebook. Give those two, a follow on their social media accounts. They are also the sponsors of the Para Cave podcast tipping competition, which is now 5 rounds old, and you would have seen on Monday I posted up the leaderboard for after round number 5, and Jaden Zaid still leads the tipping competition. Now, we had 3 people tip 7 winners last week in the competition. In 6th position currently now, Zetna275, also Jared 97, and also Chloe H18. So pretty good round for you guys, 7 out of that one. I myself got 6 correct last week and have jumped up to 43rd position. And welcoming in my little co-host, Ella. How you going, Ella?
Good.
How did you go last week in the tipping competition?
Bad.
How many tips did you get right?
4.
4? Well, 50%. That's not too bad. And
but now you're beating me.
Oh, well, we're still on the same amount of points. And you are in 52nd position. So,
I know that.
Look, you can easily jump me this weekend. So,
and I am going to.
Okay, well, we'll just have to wait and see about that one. Look, let's get into the tips or the games for this week. And look, a very strange thing, actually, that this week there is no games in Sydney. So, going to be very quiet in old Sydney town. There's Queensland, there's Newcastle, there's Perth, there's Darwin, Melbourne as well. So no games in Sydney, but it all kicks off in Brisbane on Thursday night, round number 6. The Dolphins taking on the Panthers. Now,
yes, Panthers.
Both of these, well, I don't even have to ask you what team you're going to tip, because you're tipping the Panthers.
Yeah, because I always tip them.
Yeah, I know that. So yeah,
I don't care if they're doing bad or well. I'm always tipping them.
I won't go to you then and ask you your tip, because I know who you're tipping. But
yes,
both of these sides, 1 from 4, and look, who would have thought that the Panthers would have been in this position at the moment? But the Panthers had a loss last round. The Dolphins got their first win of the season last week against the Gold Coast Titans. Tom Gilbert is back from suspension. Max Platt moves to lock. Felice Kafusi to prop. And Mark Nichols to the bench. Ray Stone, one of my favourite former Parramatta Eels players, has been suspended for 1 game. The Panthers, now big news for the Panthers. Dylan Edwards is back on deck. He missed 3 games with a groin injury. So, massive news there. He goes straight back to the fullback position. And Scott Sorensen, after a concussion protocol, he returns. But unfortunately, a couple of outs for the Panthers. Mitch Kenny with his shoulder and Jack Cole head knock are out. Blaze Talangi, former Parramatta Eels player, comes in at 5'8". And Luke Summerton is a new hooker. So, a few changes there for the Panthers. But as I said, a big in with Dylan Edwards back into the side. Now, Ella's tipping the Panthers. Look, I think the Panthers will win as well. So, I'm going to tip the Panthers as well.
Very good.
I think the Dolphins will be strong. And will give a good showing of themselves, but I just can't see the Panthers losing 5 in a row this early on in the season. The first game on Fantastic Friday, I guess you could say, is down in Wollongong at Wynn Stadium. The Dragons take on the Titans at 6 p.m. Now, the Dragons are the same 17 that went down to Parramatta in Golden Point last week. So, good news for them. No mass changes for them. A few changes, though, for the Titans. Jojo Fafita is back. Phil Sami pushes to the centres. Beau Fermor reverts to the back row. David Fafita to the bench. Sam Verrills also returns as well. So, unfortunately, a big Tino Fasul Malawi is suspended. Mo Fotuaika will captain the Gold Coast for the third time in his career. Now, the both last start losers, the Titans went down to the Dolphins, and the Dragons went down to Parramatta. Should be a pretty handy game, this one. Down in Wollongong, I do think that the Dragons do play better down there in Wollongong for some reason. The Dragons, pretty good record of late against the Titans, winning last year's 2 games. So, look, Ella, who are you going to tip in this one?
I'm going for the Dragons.
The Dragons, yes, I'm going to tip the Dragons as well in this one. They are favourites in this game, so I will tip the Dragons in this one to bounce back and get their second win of the season. The second game on Friday night is, yes, you guessed it, the Brisbane Broncos. They are playing on a Friday night. They are taking on the Sydney Roosters at Suncorp Stadium, so 2 games in a row, Thursday and Friday at Suncorp. The Roosters, they are under a little bit of pressure as well, 1-4. The Broncos, they had a massive win against the Tigers last week. So they will be full of confidence. They massively beat earlier on this season. Actually, it was the first round of the season, first round of the competition. So very early on, they're playing each other again within 5 weeks. The Broncos put 50 on the Roosters, 50-14. The first game of the season, I think it was. Yes, Thursday, or after Las Vegas anyway. So for the Broncos, Brendan Piakura has a suspension for 2 games. Jaden Hunt comes into the starting side. Now, a few changes for the Roosters. Chad Townsend, unfortunately, has been dropped, you could almost say. Hugo Savala comes into his 4th game, his first as a starter. Big loss for the Roosters. Lindsay Collins is out with a knee injury. Nat Butcher moves from lock to prop. But they do get Victor Radley from a cheekbone injury, I should say. And also, Mark Nwanga-Nitawase is also been named as 18th man, but he might be playing, you just never know. So the second game on Friday night, the Broncos and the Roosters. Ella, who you got there in that one?
I am going for the Broncos in this one.
Yes, I think I'll go the Broncos as well. And
we have basically the same tip.
Yeah, we do. And just to let everybody know, we did ours yesterday, actually.
Because we always do them on Mondays.
Yeah, before all the teams get named. So, still plenty of time to change if you need to. But, I think...
There is 2 days.
Yes, look, I think...
As it says on the footy tip.
Yeah. Look, I think the Broncos, they could put a score on the Roosters again, so... worrying times at the Roosters. The Super Saturday is in all different parts of the country. There is a double header over in Perth, and it kicks off at 3 p.m. in Eastern Standard Time, 1 p.m. over there in Perth, and it sees the Sharks take on the Sea Eagles. So, 2 last start losers. And look, a pretty crucial game for both of these sides. The Sea Eagles in 6th, the Sharks in 10th. But look, just after they're sort of having an up and down season, both of them. Probably more so the Sharks than the Sea Eagles, but a few changes to both sides. Teague Wilton and Sifa Talakai, they come back into the team. And for the Manly Sea Eagles, Josh Aloiai is good to go after he had a shoulder injury for round number 5. Corey Waddell will miss 2 games with suspension. So a few changes there. And as I said, look, a crucial game, probably more so for the Sharks, just to get back into that winning way. Manly, they still without, obviously, Tom Travojevic. But they will want to get the win after their poor showing against Melbourne at Brookvale last weekend. Sharks or Sea Eagles? Battle of the Beaches, you could almost say. Cronulla and Manly. So the Battle of the Beaches played over in Perth in the West. Who you got, Ella, in this one?
I'm going for the Sea Eagles.
Sea Eagles. Look, I think the Sharks might actually get this win. I think they will turn their form around.
Is this our first different tip?
I think so, yes. So that's the first different one there. And then the second game over there in Perth, 5:30 p.m. Australian Eastern Standard Time, 3:30 local time over there in Perth at Optus Stadium. Sees the Rabbitohs take on the Cowboys. Now this will be an interesting game because I think from both teams are playing some really good footy. However, the Rabbitohs have suffered a hat-trick of hamstring injuries. Jamie Humphries is out, Cody Walker is out, and Michaeli Ravalawa is out with hamstring injuries, different degrees of injured hamstrings, which will see them out for a different amount of time. But so, look, I would have liked the Rabbitohs' chances in this one with those 3 players playing. However, they've had to put Latrell Mitchell into 5'8" and Jaden Sullivan into the halfback position. Lewis Dodd, I think, is suspended in New South Wales Cup, so he cannot play in this game. Ewan Aiken returns. He returns to the centres. Alex Johnston also comes back as well, which is big news for them. But as I said, they're missing those 3 players there as well. Good news for the Cowboys, though. Co-captain Ruben Cotter returns after he was a late scratching due to illness last week and their win over the Panthers. So Sam McIntyre goes back to the bench and Harrison Edwards, 18th man. Look, as I said, this would have been a cracker of a game if those 2 players were playing. Those 3 players were playing. I just think it might be a little bit hard for the Rabbitohs to get this win. Latrell, he will love to play 5'8". A couple of people have said that he will maybe go in there full time soon. We'll just have to wait and see. But the Cowboys are on a bit of a roll. A couple of wins in a row now. Getting their season back on track after a little bit of a slow start. Ella, who you got in this one?
I am going for the Rabbitohs.
I will go the Cowboys in this one. I think the Cowboys can get the win over there in Perth. So I'm going to go...
As you said yesterday, they might lose because of some things. I don't know. I can't remember. But they might have the chance, even with a few things.
Yeah. They've got a 50-50 chance of winning, but you just never know. Those players that are stepping in, they might step it up and get the win for their team. The last game on Saturday at 7:35 p.m. Australian Eastern Standard Time and 7:05 local time sees the Eels take on the Raiders up in Darwin, TIO Stadium in Darwin, and this is the last season of the contract that the Eels have with the Northern Territory government. So this is the last time that they will play up there. These two sides have played previously twice up there in Darwin, 2014 and 2019. Parramatta getting the win on those occasions. But look, 2025 is a different kettle of fish. Zach Lomax, he's been named on the wing, which Parramatta fans probably thought that he would be playing, but he has played centre the first couple of weeks of the competition. Last week against the Dragons, we saw him play a little bit of wing as well, so he has been named on the wing. Sean Russell goes into the centres. Bit of a backline switch there. Riley Smith again has been named to start, but we may see a little change there like we did last week with Charlie Geimer starting and Jermaine Hopgood playing the dummy half role, but Charlie Geimer has been named on the bench as well. So Charlie Geimer on the bench, Jermaine Hopgood at lock. So look, will Riley start the game? Hard to say, but it is pretty much the same team that beat the Dragons for their first win last week. For the Raiders, no changes to them either. So they got the job done against the Sharks with that great try right in the 78th minute to Sebastian Chris. So they're playing some reasonably good footy at the moment. Last time these two sides met was last season, so this is the first time this year that they have met. The Raiders' big win last year, 41 points to 8. So the Eels got their first win of the season last week. They were wanting to go back-to-back. The Raiders now have 3 wins out of 5 games. So started off the season pretty hot, 2 wins in a row, 2 losses, and then got back on the winning ways. Ella, who are you tipping in this one?
Do you have to ask?
No, I don't have to ask.
I'm going for Raiders.
Yes, of course you are. Of course.
Because no para.
Yes, I know that. It was a silly question. I am going Parramatta.
Of course.
Sunday action goes back to the first game being at 2 p.m. and it sees the Storm take on the Warriors down there in Melbourne at Amy Park. Now, the Melbourne Storm, they put on the score last week against the Manly Sea Eagles. The Warriors, they had the bye last week, so they would have been probably watching this game. Only one change to their side. Adam Pompey goes to the wing and Rocco Berry returns to the centres. So, only the one change there. Look, last week was a little bit concerning, I guess, for Melbourne Storm fans, seeing Ryan Pappenhausen and Xavier Coates go off the field early last week. But it was just a precaution, so they have been named and they will play. So Grant Anderson on the wing as well, with Will Warbrick sidelined after recent concussion issues. So pretty handy replacement there, Grant Anderson. Look, the Melbourne Storm, they lost against the Dragons 2 weeks ago. They got the job done against the Manly Sea Eagles. They are very hard to beat at home. The Warriors, the last time they played at Amy Park, it was a very close game actually, 30 points to 26. And the Melbourne Storm got the job done over in New Zealand last year, 38 points to 24. So it's the first time this year that they are meeting. Look, Melbourne Storm, one of the competition favourites. Ella, who are you going for in this one?
I am going for the Melbourne Storm.
Yep, I will go with you on that one. I will go for the Storm on that one as well. I just think they'll be too good for the Warriors. The last game of the weekend is up in Newcastle, and a side and two teams that played in round one. So they're already playing each other again, 9th versus 11th. It is the Newcastle Knights up against the West Tigers. Now, originally when I did my tip, I think I did tip Newcastle, but I didn't realise that Jerome Luai is back for the Tigers, so a big in for them, which is great news for the Tigers. Jarrell Skelton as well, he comes back into the side as well. Samuela Fainu, he returns as well. So some big ins for the Tigers, which will put a smile on Benji Marshall's face, that is for sure. Look, Newcastle, they have had to do a number of injury-forced changes. Jack Cogger, we saw him on the sideline getting a dislocated finger put back into place. James Schiller, concussion. Jacob Saifee, calf running onto the ground. Jack Hetherington, shoulder. Adam Elliott, calf. So they're all sidelined. So Phoenix Crossland moves from hooker to halfback. Jaden Brayley, the new number 9. Kyle McCarthy comes into the wing for his second NRL game. Brodie Jones joins the pack. Also, Kai Pearce-Paul returns from suspension, and Tyrone Thompson and Matt Arthur, former Parramatta Eel, will make their club debuts off the bench. So a lot of changes there for the Newcastle Knights. They are at home, though, against the Tigers. Now, this was a very close game the first time they played. I thought the first game this season that they played was only 10-8 to the Newcastle Knights, a game that I thought the Tigers were going to get away with and win. They just missed opportunities in that game. And look, with these forced changes to Newcastle and Jerome Luai coming back to the Tigers lineup, Ella, who are you going to tip in this one?
I am going for the Knights.
Okay, well, I am actually thinking the Tigers might get away with this one. I'm going to tip the Tigers in this one, I think. They scored 24 points against Brisbane last weekend up there, so they do know how to score points, and I think just that inclusion of Jerome Luai is a added bonus for them. So I'm going to tip the Tigers in that one, actually.
Alright.
So, recapping, Retapping, yeah, I know. Recapping Ella's tips. Who have you gone for there this weekend? Just read out your tips there.
Yep. I have gone for Panthers, Dragons, Broncos, Seagulls, Rabbitohs, Raiders, Storm, and Knight.
Right, so the only different ones that we have there is, I think I've gone the Cowboys to beat South Sydney, and I've gone Parramatta to beat the Canberra Raiders, and I've got the Tigers to beat the Newcastle Knights. Otherwise, they're all the same there.
It's good that we don't have all the same tips.
Well, that is what a tipping competition's all about, so
Yeah.
we'll just have to wait and see who gets the most tips this week. Who has the bye this week?
The Bulldogs.
That's right. The high-flying Bulldogs, 5 wins in a row and now a bye. So before their big blockbuster clash against the South Sydney Rabbitohs on Good Friday, early word is that they are expecting about 60,000+ there on Good Friday. But look, happy tipping throughout this weekend. Enjoy your rugby league over this weekend. Thank you very much for listening to the tipping podcast, as I said, brought to you by Assure Strata Reports on Instagram and Buddy Oldman Masters Boxer on Facebook. So please give them a follow on their social media accounts. That would be most appreciated. And stay tuned for Monday for the tipping competition updated results. And if you are in the tipping competition. Don't forget to get your tips in
And
by
good luck.
Thursday. Yes, and good luck. Follow our tips if you want. Follow my tips. Follow Ella's tips.
No, only follow my tips because I know they're going to be right.
Well, we'll just have to wait and see. Thank you very much for listening, and the Para Cave podcast by the fan for the fans.
Bye.
Go Para.
Thank you for listening to another episode of the Para Cave podcast. See you next time.